Tonight's guest is Don Ulsch, longtime friend and colleague, and someone whom I consider to be the undisputed authority and expert in cybersecurity. A lot of other people have the same opinion, trust me. His biography is long. It's in the description below, so you can read his entire biography, but suffice it to say, this gentleman knows what he's talking about. Don, I want to start off by asking you, before Putin decided to invade Ukraine, there was a lot of concern in some sectors that there would first be a blitzkrieg of offensive cyber war against Ukraine, perhaps NATO and the United States, and certainly against Ukraine, but we didn't really see that. Do you think Russia really has that good of a capability, like was believed was going to happen prior to the land invasion? Or is it kind of symbolic of the way the whole Russian military has just fumbled the ball as far as Putin is concerned? And let's hope it continues to fumble the ball.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think that everybody is quite surprised that we haven't seen more aggressive activity in the cyber realm launched by Russia, and there could be several reasons for it. But to answer your first question, is if you go back to the invasion of Georgia, and then Estonia. I mean, yes, I think Russia has the capability. Is the capability as expansive as China, as interesting or powerful as China and North Korea, maybe even Iran? I'm sure it probably is. So we know they have the expertise, they have the capability. And I think that if we start looking at reasons why they may not have done this, it may be part of a strategic plan to catch us when our defenses are down. Right now, we have had over the last weeks since the Russian invasion of the Ukraine sort of a shields up defensive posture. And if you're Russia, you might believe that you're going to do the least amount of damage when our defenses are at their peak. I don't know that is the case. I don't know if that's exactly why we're not seeing the kinds of attacks, but I think it is one rational explanation. The other possible explanation is that typically you would see cyber warfare utilized as a force multiplier. First of all, we don't know that Russia has actually refrained from cyber attacks. Maybe they have not been identified as such. Maybe they are underwhelming. Maybe they are largely unsuccessful, so therefore we're not hearing as much about it. There could be any number of reasons, but I would say that the time that they would effectively launch these cyber attacks is going to be when our shields, so to speak, are lowered, our defenses are lowered, and we are not expecting it. So in order to have a maximum capability and a maximum level of impact, Russia may be waiting until our defenses are down. They would be far more effective that way, which would be interesting because generally speaking, when you think about a cyber attack as a force multiplier, you would go in and disrupt command control communications. Mm-hmm. And that appears not to have been done. So are we going to see something new that happens at the end of this campaign? in sort of the last throes of the assault against Russia. Now, one of the other things that I think is also interesting is, will Russia get China or North Korea or Iran to act on its behalf? And because if you want to talk about a very powerful force multiplier, it would be if China, Iran, North Korea sided with Russia as part of that China-Russia cyber bloc, and attacks were launched then. But that doesn't appear to be happening either. But again, I caution that just because it does not appear to have happened doesn't mean that it's not. And I'm very hesitant to actually predict that China is going to jump in this for in a cyber attack until they see a little bit better how this goes.
Yeah, your point's well taken on why Russia perhaps has not done this, and I've been thinking the same thing, that they were probably or perhaps waiting for a more opportune time when defenses were down. If China and Iran did get involved, not predicting anything, but what could one expect?
Well, first of all, it would be a significant escalation, and I mean, look, certainly they want to hit energy and banking. So if you look at North Korea has been successful in attacks on banking systems. Iran has been successful in attacks on oil fields, energy and petroleum. I think we would see more of the same. A lot depends on strategy. If we're looking at, let's say, one of our polls looked at concerns about the SWIFT financial global payment system. If there really is interest in moving into an alternative system by the Russia-China bloc and having something that competes with SWIFT, clearly they would want to attack that system and look at making it seem less reliable and more vulnerable, therefore trying to attract others to it. So I would say energy and finance, banking are going to be some of the key targets, as they have been historically. Probably less in terms of violations of intellectual property, and really more of a focus on critical infrastructure, because that's where the greater level of vulnerabilities will be attacked. And attacked more aggressively with greater impact. But I think a lot depends on how China perceives its role in all of this. There's a 5,000-word agreement, a cooperation agreement between Russia and China. We don't know everything that's in it, but levels of cooperation around energy, space, food. The application of a wide range of technologies for internet services, energy from space, things that are very attractive to developing nations, the ability of China to control more of the global food supply, increased yield, increased processing capability, more effective distribution through sophisticated logistical analytics using artificial intelligence. So, if China does get involved, they can both, directly attack critical infrastructure throughout NATO, the U.S., and in the Ukraine, but they can also assist Russia in technology and in upgrading Russia's technology and the types of services that Russia can provide through technology. So, we have to wait and see. I think a lot depends on how China perceives Russia's level of success in this invasion. Right now, it doesn't look great. I would say that we're all probably a bit surprised that the Ukrainian resistance has been so intense, and that the Russian capability does not appear to have been what we thought it might be. So, those are all interesting points. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see the outcome here. And then we'll figure out whether or not this is going to lead to simple regime change in the Ukraine, or is it going to signify something larger in terms of sort of a new world order promulgated by China, Russia, with the support of the other nations? But all that remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a big concern right now, or a substantive concern. I don't know if it's a big concern, but it's certainly a concern. And it's been expressed by a number of people, is that Putin's throwing around the seeming presumption that he's going to use nuclear weapons at some point, which goes back to an old Soviet or Warsaw Pact versus NATO Pact playbook from during the height of the Cold War. But in lieu of doing that, perhaps he might decide to take his offensive cyber capabilities to the extreme forefront of what he's got in his hand, rather than doing launching or throwing around some tactical nuclear warheads as an offensive attack on infrastructure, communications, command and control, and what have you. Is the U.S. and NATO prepared for a real offensive cyber war like that, if it comes down to it?
It's interesting. One of the polls that I ran this past Tuesday, March the 14th.
Let me put those up. Which one is it first, Don?
Let me see here. There were two in particular that I thought were very interesting. So bear with me just a minute while I pull that up here. So, one was on our capability. So it's called China, Russia. It's actually slide number 7. China, Russia, and the cyber force multiplier, a new level of threat and risk. And after the explanation, I asked the question, are government and industry prepared to counter this growing, unpredictable, multi-dimensional cyber threat environment? We had about just under 3,700 views of the poll. 97%, this is why I think this is interesting. Usually we see things a lot more 60-40, 70-30, 50-50. 97% said no, that we are not ready for this. Now, you have to bear in mind, who are the people who are rendering opinions here? They are risk managers of one form or another. They're privacy professionals, they're information and cybersecurity professionals, they're lawyers dealing with corporate risk, regulatory compliance, corporate reporting. They are some entrepreneurs, some board members, but these are people who deal with risk, and they deal with technology, and they understand it. And from their perspective, when facing an integrated civilian, commercial, military cyber capability, their opinion seems overwhelmingly to suggest that we are not prepared to deal with this. 97%. If it was 50-50, I'd say, well, maybe you could sort of argue this either way. But this is pretty compelling. And there's one other slide that's pretty interesting here. And I think
that is compelling, given who has responded to these. And I know who has responded to a lot of these, the industry and the people. 97% is a very high number.
Yeah, I mean, it's disturbing. It really is. On February 17th, one of our polls asked the question, well, first of all, the title of it was, should we allow hacking back at hackers? That is, if your organization has been hacked.
Which one is that, Don?
That would be number 12.
Okay. Got it.
So Should hacking back against our cyber adversaries be legal for non-governmental organizations such as civilians and businesses? Now, I was very surprised over this answer, Tony. Yes, 58% of
Yes.
respondents said yes. Now, that's a huge number. I would have expected 97% to have said no. But the concern is this. I think it signals there's a lack of frustration with not being able to effectively combat many of these cyber attacks and operations. That's a concern. There's an additional belief that people in cybersecurity environments are probably very good hackers, and if somebody hacks them, why can't they hack back at them and cause damage to that particular organization that attacked them? Well, clearly this is against the law. It's a violation of the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act to go into somebody else's computer without authorization. But the legal aspect of this is just one. Number one, how do you know for sure who actually hacked into your organization? Do you have the skills to hack back in there and to do it accurately? The answer is, in most cases, most civilians and corporations do not have that capability. I'll give you an example of how things like this can go the wrong way. A few years ago, I'm going to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a Midwestern military organization in the United States thought that it was under attack from a university in Georgia. And the Georgia University appeared to be launching an active attack against this military installation. So it was a cyber attack aimed at a U.S. Military base. Now, it was not the university. It turns out China was actually launching this cyber attack, but it rerouted the attack through this university. So if the people at the military base had an immediate response and said, "Hey, we're hacking the people who are hacking us," they could have caused damage to the systems at the university. So you open up legal issues, liability issues, corporate governance issues, issues of regulatory compliance. Most businesses are not and should not be in the business of entering other computer systems on an unauthorized basis, whether they belong to a government or another corporation or a competitor. It's just not a good practice. They often lack the skills, the direction. They often have the wrong intent, perhaps the wrong motive, and perhaps the wrong computer systems. This is best left to the professionals. And offensive cybersecurity, where you're actually attacking our adversaries, should be left to the government, period. Now, again, the fact that we have almost a 60-40 split here, is interesting, and it tells us a few things. It says probably a larger number of companies think that they have a cyber attack capability that they may not have. It tells me they think they have the ability to absolutely, without doubt, identify the source of the hacking into their systems, which is probably not the case. And you don't always automatically know who attacked you, where they attacked you from, how they attacked you, and what the damage is. So, launching an attack is not only illegal, it is not very well thought out as a strategy, and particularly for your corporation. And also, there are those who would hire third parties to act on behalf of them. So, it's also illegal to hire a third party, whether it's one individual or a company that specializes in cybersecurity. It's illegal to hire them to hack back into some organization. So this is just fraught with risk, which I've just defined from legal to corporate governance. There could be insurance issues. People could go to jail. It's just not a good idea. And that's why I was surprised at this roughly 60-40 split, because what I've just said is what most people probably know, and yet they're not really paying attention to what their internal cyber risk analyst is telling them. So anyway, that's a concern. There is another slide I'd like to draw your attention to, Tony. It's it's slide number. Let's see. It's slide number. Let's see. What is it?
Those are disturbing statistics.
I mean, they really are. Pardon me while I just find this one slide. Oh, here we go. This was from March 14th, so just a couple of days ago. And the title of it is Implications. Did Russia ask China for military assistance? Now, very significant question. We believe that probably did. And the question is, do you believe that China will risk its economic future with the US, the UK, and Europe as it commits to Russia, even military assistance? Now, we've had now in excess of 5,300 views of this. And again, pretty evenly split, 45% saying yes, China will make that risk, 55% saying no. I'd like to be clear about how China is going to look at this.
And I just want to put this in again for our listeners. The respondents to these surveys, these questions that Don has asked, are cream of the crop. They are the professional cybersecurity professionals in all aspects, all industries. So you're getting a very good perspective of who has been responding to these surveys. I just want to point that out, Don.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Tony. I want to be real clear about what we can expect from China. You know, as I think I have said to you before on this program, China makes investment decisions, whether they're geopolitical investment decisions, money, commitment of forces, economic assistance and support. They make all of these decisions through the Chinese Communist Party, and the foundation for their decisions have to do with a predicted or probable political outcome. So it's sort of if you look at the New World Order opportunity that could arise out of a Russian victory in Ukraine, if Putin were to try and renegotiate the terms of the Cold War and overtake other former Soviet bloc countries and was successful in that, there's a vested interest that China has in that. Russia can do the dirty work, but it's actually China that have the opportunity to provide goods, services, automobile, food, internet services, energy. It's China that would be the significant beneficiary in this. Now, that would occur during a transition period where China is leveraging what Putin is doing and transitioning some of its capacity to Russia, while perhaps backing away from the United States, the UK, and Europe. Now, we've already seen this happen to some extent. And in the area of technology acquisition, cyber espionage, international joint research ventures, international market ventures, we have seen China run up to resistance. So under the various laws in the United States where we are cutting back on the ability of China to acquire technology here. That is having an impact in China on their technology innovation gap. So China has a significant technology innovation gap, and they're having to make up for that gap by acquiring technology in many different ways from many different places. And what we have to look at is when you take Europe, for example, Huawei and ZTE Communications. Europe has become very suspect and shut down these companies in many places because of concerns over corruption, sanctions. It can be a dirty business when you start selling technology into some of these countries, and particularly when you're doing it with suspect technology that may have been stolen from other entities. Mm-hmm. So that's a big concern. So we're narrowing that access to the technology in the U.S. It's happening across Europe and the UK. So in some way, that's forcing China to perhaps move closer to China. China move closer to Russia. And if Putin has this grand design of re-engineering a new Soviet Union based on the former Soviet Union, or anything that looks like that model, then China is the beneficiary. They're going to sell them food. They're going to sell them energy.
Certainly.
They're going to provide e-commerce through satellites. They're going to provide energy in several decades through space technology. So China is right now sort of playing both sides, right? They're leveraging what they can with Russia, and they're leveraging what they can with the US, UK, and Europe. However, China has made this cooperation agreement. They've signed this cooperation agreement. It seems to have very few, if any, limitations. I think it probably would allow for military assistance, but China is not going to, I think, do that too soon, or certainly prematurely, until they have a better understanding of what this outcome looks like. Now, we talked about at the beginning of the show. It's very surprising, the lack of progress and the lack of elegance, if you will, in the invasion by Russia into the Ukraine. I'm sure that causes the CCP to sit back and take note of that.
I'm sure it does,
and express concern internally. Now, if Putin had actually gone in, made a slam dunk, taken over in 72 hours, taken over the Ukraine, resistance was light. That's a great blueprint, which should be of concern to Taiwan, Bulgaria, Romania, Estonia, and other countries.
Exactly.
But that's not what has happened. So I think that China is probably looking at this. They're evaluating. They will provide soft assistance to Russia, but I don't think they're going to overcommit at the risk of complete alienation of the U.S. and NATO.
I don't think so either. I think China has, this is my opinion. There are others who I think share this opinion that China has looked at this situation and has been surprised by the well, I'll say camaraderie, but the pulling together of the U.S. and NATO in a way that we haven't seen since the end of World War II. That's got to be a little unsettling for the CCP, and the fact that Russia, its military, obviously isn't as good as, at least its ground troops, its ground force, isn't as good as we thought it was. They even their Air Force, their air superiority has been lacking as well. Of course, I think a lot of this has to do with their logistical problems. They didn't plan for a logistical supply chain having to run this deep, this long, and that has certainly been a problem. But China's obviously been looking at this, and I think that's why China didn't publicly say that they were going to send weapons. They kind of had a saving face explanation for that, which I suspect maybe some of our diplomats and some of theirs agreed that, okay, you can say that to save face. But as this drags on, it could be something else entirely.
Yeah, there are lots of contradictions at play here. So we're seeing some signs of Russian weakness. It's been quite obvious over the last number of weeks. But a lot of this started when Russia and China were also identifying weaknesses in the U.S. and thought that this may be a good time. So just as Putin did not want this to happen during the Olympics, out of courtesy to President Xi, it's a matter of timing. And I think part of the timing began in the withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan. So China was a big beneficiary of that. Russia was a beneficiary of it. Where we've got the Pakistan Economic Corridor, close relations now between China and the Taliban in Pakistan, the Taliban in Afghanistan, the rich assets such as lithium, for the electric vehicle battery market. We're seeing signs of weakness in the U.S. Inflation, is another sign. So, from one point of view, this was probably a good time, from Putin's point of view, to launch this invasion. Now, is he using his B team? I don't know, but clearly not successful. But China is not going to risk its strategy on Putin if Putin can't carry his part of the bargain. And this is an issue right now. And so I think China is adopting a wait and see policy as to how far it will get into executing this cooperation agreement with Russia. So I would say that the greater the level of success that Russia experiences, the greater the level of cooperation it will see arise from this agreement with China.
That's a good point. If let me throw this out. If Russia does get pushed back, and he doesn't decide to unleash an offensive cyber storm, and doesn't hold good to his threat of tactical nuclear weapons against NATO, I would assume, and it comes to some sort of a stalemate, where does that leave China at that point?
Well, I think it forces China to reevaluate this New World Order partnership with Russia, and maybe what happens is that China sees that its economic policies and its sustainable economic growth around the world is more effective the way it's been doing it, which has been through the establishment of these relationships, taking over certain markets, investing and acquiring equity positions in companies, furthering its Belt and Road Initiative, building up its satellite capability for the provision of internet services and e-commerce in developing nations, continuing along that line with developing satellites for the delivery of energy from space with solar power satellites. Maybe this becomes the alternative strategy. So maybe the economic success and the growth that China has experienced, maybe that is the better path. And I would say if Putin fails to deliver on what he appears to have promised China, China may sit back and say, "Hey, it was a great attempt, but we think we'll continue to partner with you, but we're going to go back to our original strategy of economic sustainability and growth in the traditional way that it's been doing it." I'll tell you, I'm not sure that China And of course, hey, listen, what do I know? I could be very wrong.
You're usually
very
right,
hard-
Don.
it's very hard to predict. But I would say that China does not have much of an appetite for the deployment by Russia of tactical nuclear weapons inside of Europe.
Yes.
That's a very, very big step. And if you look at the size of the China GDP, you look at the size of the U.S. GDP, and then look at the size of the Russian GDP. Russia is clearly the smaller player. Very aggressive, very bold, and clearly they have an aggression agenda. But they are the smaller player in this scenario, and I don't think there's much to be gained by China for supporting any sort of tactical nuclear deployment. And if it ever came out that China did support that as part of this cooperation agreement, I think that would have a very chilling effect on China's ability to utilize whatever goodwill it has around the world.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't bode well for their ideas of conquest of Taiwan.
No,
they had to take that into consideration. Like I said, they're obviously sitting back and looking at the pulling together of U.S. and NATO as a force against totalitarian communist regimes, socialist regimes. Call it what you want: fascist, socialist, communist, autocratic. They're all totalitarian regimes. They're dictatorships when it comes down to it. I don't care what label of facade you put on it. They're certainly looking at this and realizing that there's a whole chunk of the world that is now allied against suppression of liberty and freedom. And they've got to be looking at it that way. I would think, I would hope that they would have the sanity to look at it that way, but I could be wrong.
Well, I think the fact of the matter, Tony, is that China and Russia have a lot more in common politically and ideologically.
That's true.
Than the United States and China do. On the other hand, when you look at economic performance, China has much more in common with the United States than it does with Russia in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of technology development, in terms of utilizing and leveraging international markets across various industries to advance their political agenda. And I mean, that is what is happening with China, and it's been successful in doing that. China is very active, let's say, in East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm working on a project right now in East Africa with an exile, a regime in exile, and they want to try and get back in the country and take over that East African country. And the problem is that China is in there supporting the current government, and Chinese has now become the second language. That's what they're teaching in school. They're not teaching English. They're not teaching French. They're not teaching Spanish. They're teaching Chinese. China's building the schools. China is investing. China is all over this particular country, and through their debt financing program, the country has not been able to service the debts, and it takes every year a certain amount of equity in the energy assets in this country. So that's working for China all around the world. So all I'm saying is that you might find a lot less reception to the Belt and Road Initiative if they get into the sponsorship or support of tactical nuclear weapons applied against other countries. That's a major step. I think it would be insane for Putin to do it, and it would certainly make no sense for China to support it in this current environment, or actually in any other environment.
In any environment. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Yeah, I was concerned about that from the very beginning, and actually it made some comments to some friends that this is like, like I said earlier, it's almost as if this is it seems like it to me, a classic Warsaw, height of the Cold War, late 50s, maybe early to mid 60s type of Warsaw fear against NATO. And, if NATO pushes Russia back, Russia's going to start using tactical nuclear warheads, striking Brussels, other capitals, and it would just escalate from there. I can't imagine that he's that insane, but there's something.
Well, let's hope not, right?
Yeah, let's hope not.
Tony, let me draw your attention, if I may, just to slide 11.
Okay.
Now, the title of this is China and Russia, a cyber power alliance. What's interesting is that, the question is China likely to engage in cyber warfare against the U.S. and Europe that would benefit both Russia as a force multiplier and China itself? This is where 86% now say yes, but we haven't really seen that. So when Russia is asking China for military assistance, we have to assume that part of that military assistance is cyber. And yet it doesn't seem to be happening. So, if I were putting myself in Putin's chair, and I were reaching out to the Chinese Communist Party, and I was asking for military assistance, I would not be asking simply for conventional military capability. China has, through the People's Liberation Army and the Ministry of State Security, very powerful cyber capabilities and very powerful cyber attributes and on a very broad scale. And certainly Russia has probably asked for this. So given the fact that Russia is asking for it and apparently has not received it at this point and deployed it, tells me that China may not be happy with the progress that Russia is making. I would cite that as one potential possibility. The other possibility is that if Putin does want to pull the cyber trigger, so to speak, and they do it at some point, days or weeks or maybe even months down the road, that if China does it, it will have a much more powerful impact than if Russia does it alone. But it tells me that the people who are managing risk, not only in the United States, but in the UK and across the NATO alliance, are saying 86% that China is going to do this. So, and they haven't. So the real question then is, as we've been talking about, why hasn't it happened and will it happen? And I'll tell you, one other potential outcome is, I think I heard today, I haven't really followed it that closely. I've been really busy today, but I think I heard earlier that there's talk of a sort of a settlement, a peace settlement between Russia and the Ukraine. Now, if that happens, then things are stalled from a military perspective, and that's not what China would want to see. So China may just completely back off. But again, I make the point: if Putin is asking China for military assistance, that military assistance has to include cyber as a force multiplier. It would be crazy for Putin not to ask for it, because I think it's much more powerful than what Russia can bring to the plate on its own. And the fact that we're not seeing it is interesting for reasons that we've stated. Either China is holding off, or Russia wants to apply it at a later stage.
But even if Russia wants to apply it at a later stage, do you think that China is willing to really let the world know, or even the West know, what its true capabilities are? Because I don't think China's really unleashed what it's really capable of doing in the cyber context.
I think that'll only happen if Russia achieves what China would consider to be success in the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So listen, if you're going to get into a fight and you need a partner, do you want a partner who's as strong as you are or stronger, or as mean as you are or meaner, or do you want a weaker party to help you out of this fight? Well, right now, Russia appears to be the weaker party. Why does China want to invest its future and its economic sustainability and its economic growth on a partner that perhaps cannot rise to the occasion and deliver what Putin and Russia say they can deliver?
Yeah. Some of these surveys are very good, Don. Did you have some that you wanted to highlight? Because as I was going through them earlier, I found some of them quite fascinating with regards to the responses that they were getting from the caliber of people that are responding to these surveys.
Yeah, I mean, we're averaging anywhere from 2,000 to over 5,000 views of these surveys. I don't maintain that they are statistically viable.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. But what they do is they do provide us with trend data and what we're seeing. I think slide number 9, which we ran on March the 1st on LinkedIn. It's titled "China on Russia's Invasion of Ukraine: A Special Military Action." So, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China has called it a special military action. They haven't called it an invasion. So the mere fact that China is not acknowledging that this was a full force invasion, but calling it a special military action, they're putting a framework around it and trying to control the perception. And
they're using the same terminology that Russia is using. Neither of them has called it a war, and they will put you in jail if somebody does.
That's right. That's
exactly.
Right. So the question is, I say in the sort of the last sentence of the basis here, is the prospect of protracted Russian occupation of Ukraine enough to embolden China to back Russia and risk U.S. allied relations? So the question becomes, will a declared victory by Russia over the Ukraine embolden China to more aggressively and openly support Russia as a show of solidarity? And I think that the only way that China will actively engage in this and live up to the larger elements of this cooperation agreement is in a decisive declared victory by Russia. Mm-hmm. So I think if we want to know how China is going to respond, I think we have to look at how Russia fares in this entire scenario. And I will tell you, I would imagine that the CCP is sitting around the table, as we speak, and talking about Taiwan. All right, so this is not how they would want this to go in Taiwan. Okay, so I just think that predicting how China. China has a set strategy, right? We know what China wants to do. How they do it is a determinant of who they partner with and what those partners bring to the table. And what I think China thought Russia was going to bring to the table, Russia did not bring to the table. So they're going to have to adjust that strategy. But I will tell you this: China is not going to risk its strategy on Russia. All right. If Russia can help, great. They'll work on this cooperation agreement. That's all great. But I will guarantee you, no way is the Chinese Communist Party going to overinvest in a Russia that is incapable of swiftly and significantly taking over a neighboring country such as the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that point. I think, as we've talked about earlier, I said earlier, China's got to be looking at this, that if it does decide to invade Taiwan at some point in the future, it's got to be looking at this united front from the West, the free world, let's just call it what it is, that it's got to be thinking, and the CCP's got to be thinking, I would think that they've got to be thinking, that the West would do the same thing if China invaded Taiwan, that it would coalesce against China.
Yeah, I keep going back in my head to the Gulf War when we were talking about shock and awe. And, the only shock and awe that we've had in the invasion of Russia is the lack of success. I'm shocked that it's going the way that it is, and not in much awe of Russian capability on the basis of their execution of this invasion so far. So, but there's a lesson to be learned from China there, and the lesson is that if China were to overtake Taiwan, they probably would do it most aggressively, and where the outcome was not in dispute. But I think China has a decision to make, as I mentioned briefly before, and that is, do they see a new world order where they partner with Russia as a sort of a business and geopolitical companion to spread their brand of capitalism, communism around the world, or do they double down on their strategy that they have been implementing for some years now, that seems to be working and advancing the Chinese Communist Party's agenda? And I don't know that the final word is in on that yet, but I've got to believe that those gathered around the 8 families that are gathered around the CCP table have got to be thinking about this and looking at what is that next step. Worst case basis, they simply can live up to their cooperation agreement with Russia by not doing much. To my knowledge, I don't believe that there are explicit requirements outlined in this agreement. That's not the way it would usually be done. It's what does each of the nations involved in this cooperation agreement agree they will do strategically, and to what extent. And that extent will depend on the outcome of various events and conditions that will occur over time, this being the first of them.
This being the first. Yep. Well, Don, I'm going to let you go because I know that your wife is coming home. So from the airport, I think. So thanks for coming back on and elucidating some of this for us, and especially some of the survey results. And I just want to say again, the respondents to these surveys, even though they're not statistically, I don't want to say not statistically sound, but they give a trend. They give a trend, and they are coming. The respondents are the cream of the crop of the cyber world, and you've done a great thing with that. It's being viewed very favorably because it seems like that the responses over time have just gone up.
Yeah, over 130,000 views so far, and over 28,000 just on the Russia-Ukraine situation. And again, though they are not statistically, I mean, though they are not statistically valid, I believe, given who is answering, responding to the surveys, they are strong indicators, I think. And so we look at what are these indicators. Interestingly enough, all the major China banks look at this. All right.
Interesting.
So in one of the slides, I think the first slide that has all of the brands where these people are working, including senior executives in China banks. So, it'd be interesting to see where we go from here.
Yeah, well, Don, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Can I just close with one comment?
Absolutely.
I think it is imperative for us to not lower our cyber shields. I think that we have to maintain this level of defense readiness and this level of defense capability, cyber defense capability into the future, because as soon as we lower those cyber defense shields, as soon as we take our eyes off of this and start to focus on something else, that is when we will be most vulnerable, and that is when we will have this greater likelihood of attack. I think they're waiting until we are less ready.
Have any prediction on how long they may be looking out over the horizon, or does it depend on whether they have a stalemate inside Ukraine?
Sort of two views on that. No, I don't have. I don't have a sense of timing. I do know that the longer they wait, the less ready we'll be. All right, because nobody can stay at this level of readiness forever. Right. So we will see that deteriorate over time. Timing, days, weeks, months. I don't know. But we can expect it, and also. If they attack when our defenses are down, it bears the appearance of the greater level of power and effectiveness that their cyber attacks will have. So maybe if they have a full-scale cyber attack now and it's not as successful, that says one thing. It says that we do have this condition of readiness. But again, I go back to that one slide, Tony, where 96 or 97% of the professionals in this risk industry don't believe that we are ready.
That seems like a refrain we've heard for decades, Don.
It is, and it doesn't mean that we're not getting better. It means that the threats are intensifying and the capabilities of our adversaries are getting much stronger.
Well, as events warrant, I hope you come back on to illuminate more of this for our listeners.
Anytime, Tony. It's always a pleasure. And
Don, thank you.
Congratulations on the success of your program.
Well, thank you. I have to say that I think it's people like you who've been on from the very beginning that has helped it be what it is today. So keep coming on, my friend, and keep doing the great work.
Thanks very much.